Hey folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, the Red Wings, they needed one more measly point. One more overtime, even a loss in overtime. And they're in the playoffs. By the way, I was told, or maybe I wasn't told, maybe I've just heard, that if you enjoyed the consecutive victories over the Canadians, especially the game here a couple nights ago in Detroit, where they won in overtime, that you were somehow a loser. Maybe we can talk about too. All of a sudden, people's fandoms being questioned for enjoying this, what was a pretty exciting last couple of weeks, especially this last few days. So, in any case, we want to welcome in Helene St. James, Carlos, to talk about all this. She's slept. I don't know that she slept. She says 2 hours. That's probably being generous. She doesn't look like she hasn't gotten sleep, though. That's what really matters. Right, Carlos?
Absolutely. She looks camera ready as usual. Right, Helena?
I try.
Well, it's good to have you here again. That's a whirlwind for you. You're in Little Caesars one night. You're in Montreal the next night. You don't even have time to enjoy that city. But you did enjoy a couple of really fun hockey games, Helena. So what are you not left with, but what are your impressions of what went on recently and just kind of your pulse of where this team's at, a point short of the playoffs?
Well, first, I just want to touch on last night because that was just, 5-6 of the most intensely exciting, nerve-wracking minutes I can recall in recent times, because it wasn't just what are the Wings going to do. It was, what are the Washington Capitals and Philadelphia Flyers going to do? And that game was running 5-6 minutes behind Detroit. So I'm glad Detroit went past regulation because, had the Wings, had they lost, it was over. But had they won in regulation, but we didn't know the outcome of the Washington game, we'd have just been sitting there, waiting for that to end. So those last few minutes, I'm watching the ice at Bell Center. I'm watching, the score in between Washington and Philadelphia. So it was incredibly tense, and it was just, talking to the players afterwards when they most found out before the shootout or during the shootout. James Reimer found out. He said afterwards he was the most excited he's ever been for a quarter of a second when Patrick Kane scored in the shootout. And then he saw on the bench that none of his teammates were excited, and he knew what their fate was. So that's just, I don't know if a victory has ever been greeted with such a sense of letdown, and just players looked absolutely gutted afterwards. But I think the Wings deserve a ton of credit for how far they have come, for how they were in this chase. I mean, I don't think you can get much closer than the shootout in game 82. That's when you relinquish it. And unfortunately, that 7-game losing streak, you can look at that and say, if only they had beaten Arizona, a terrible team, at least once, Carlos and I might be deciding which swanky restaurant in New York City we were going to eat dinner at Saturday night.
Yeah, that's crazy, Helena, that the Wings cost you two a trip to New York City. That's not cool. That's outrageous. And I know Carlos has a question for you, Helena, but real quickly, you've been covering this sport a long time. Have you ever seen the player who scores a game-winning goal react the way Patrick Kane did last night?
No, I mean, that's the shame of it. I mean, he said he kind of knew, and then he realized it when he saw everybody's reaction. I mean, it's just, they just won the game, and yet it's over. So it was just a very unusual, surreal ending to that game.
Yeah, you touched on the most important part of this whole thing is it really was a gut punch to Shawn Windsor that we're missing out on living high on the hog on the road, which is, as we know, it's Shawn Windsor's, the whole raison d'etre for his job here at the Free Press. But yeah, it was, in the, watching the post-game interviews and, you and the other reporters talking to Dylan Larkin, and it looks like someone ran over his puppy. I mean, it's just like he was just devastated. And it was interesting. I think it was Patrick Kane. It was the game, the last game at Little Caesars, the home finale. And it was, I believe, the goal that Raymond scored. It was one of the goals, and Patrick Kane had set it up. He got an assist on it. And Dylan Larkin was so excited and jumping up and down. And he's been through the worst of this whole rebuild, right? He makes the playoffs as a rookie and then hasn't sniffed them since then. It's been such a hard journey for him, and I think he takes it, rightly so, as the captain of the team, harder than just about anybody else. They were all dejected, but you could see, Perron, Kane afterward. Yeah, they were sad, but they haven't. Kane's barely been here. It was tough, and then that's where I do feel bad for this team. And Lalone kept saying, all the things the way we've battled and all this stuff, and 11 points better than last year. All that's definitely true. To me, the disappointment was definitely that losing streak, and also not taking care of Washington at home last week. That was the big faceplant. That to me was Washington doesn't deserve to be in these playoffs. Their goal differential is horrible. They're probably gonna. I don't know if they're gonna score a goal. I don't know. Who knows? You never know in the playoffs, but I think the Wings would have been a better playoff team. I think showing this resilience, these third period comebacks and all that, the grittiness, the guttiness, all that stuff, it would have been great for them to make the playoffs, but they only have themselves to blame. And this is something where I think Larkin was asked this about, maybe the inconsistency, right? Like the earlier season, November games, wherever, when you drop games that you shouldn't have dropped. No team's going to be perfect. Any team that's on the bubble, you're going to lose games. You're just going to, somewhere there's going to be a stretch where you don't win. But those games, looking back on the Phoenix type games later in the season, even blowing a chance to get some easy points, I think that's the problem, and that's the step that the team needs to take in the future, is having a more consistent effort and beating the teams that are beatable. Because the really good teams are the teams that really deserve to be in the playoffs. I don't think they drop those games as consistently as the Wings did, and created this problem for themselves. So is that on the loan? Is it on the players themselves? Where does Yzerman get help? There's kind of a lot to look at in the offseason, right?
Yeah, just going back to Dylan, it absolutely was hardest on him. Guys like David Perron and Patrick Kane, they've won the cup. They know what their careers have been fulfilled by that. Lucas Raymond, Moritz Seider, they're at they're 22, 23 years old. Like their whole careers are in front of them. Dylan, kind of middle-aged career-wise, but he has been through some tough seasons with this franchise. So, I think it was understandable why he was the one who looked as gutted as he did after last night's game. And, just going back to that Washington game they lost, this is where hockey, just unlike other sports, one man can make a difference, and it was Charlie Lindgren. That was one of the best played games the Wings put on all season. Like, I was sitting up in the press box thinking, well, why can't they attack like this more often? They were doing what successful teams do, and just, funneling pucks at him all the time. Like that's what they need to do more of. I think, Washington's goal differential, but you have to give them credit. They closed it out at the end. They did what they had to. So to say they don't deserve to be in there, I would agree Wings would have made a more interesting addition. But I do think, you have to tip your hat to Washington. They got the job done. And to me, it's that home game against Arizona. It's one thing to blow it, that Friday night in Arizona, but to come home and do it within a week later and again give up 4 goals to a team that's so far below them in the standing. That's one of the worst in the league. So that and then San Jose, they had a 4-0 lead on them and went on to lose. They only got a point. That's 3 points right there that would have made the difference. So it is something they need to take a look at to learn. Games in December can matter as much as games in April, because if you win those in December, maybe April isn't quite such a intense crunch for a team. They'll now have 5 months to reflect on that.
Well, I'm with you, Helene. The game against Washington, I was at that game with you, and they almost doubled their shots up, right? They were attacking, they played hard. They came out with the kind of intensity in the first period that they hadn't shown in March as much, but they were a little unlucky too. Look, and I know every team deals with injuries, but the margin for error is thin with this team. So when Larkin went down, what he missed 7 games, 8 games, and what they finished the month 3-11 or somewhere around there. mean, that's just, it was more or less directly due to that. And I've been able to, it took him a while to figure that out. They didn't really get going again until he got back. So there's a little bit of unluckiness in there. But to your point about the 4 goals in San Jose, and even these last couple of nights with Montreal, the way they were scoring, that's the issue, right? I mean, you can say goaltending for sure, but defensively, there were too many times they struggled to clear the puck. Such a fundamental thing. It sounds simple, I know, for a lot of fans, but it's not always so simple. But to me, that's an area they really got to get better at. So on the nights when somebody like Lindgren is standing up, you know, and having a great night like he did for Washington last week, you can grind it out. And in fact, they couldn't clear. I'm trying to remember, was it Comfort couldn't clear that night against Washington? They led to a goal, and that's just been an issue all season long. So to me, and I'm curious what you think, is it those sort of fundamental things on the defensive end to allow them to increase their margin a little bit in these games?
I think it's. I mean, I think they need a more cohesive defensive structure. You know, I mean, you know, just be harder on the puck, and you know, there were times they just gave the opponent, you know, they just let them set up in the slot, time, space. You know, like you're just like, how on earth is that guy not defended? You know, just glaring errors like that. You know, missed assignments that, you know, and I mean, people will focus in on the defenseman, but to me, it's team defense. You know, it's everybody. And, you know, I mean, Alex Lyon and James Reimer didn't have their best games Monday and Tuesday, respectively, but I think they gave them a chance. And Alex Lyon certainly deserves a ton of credit for why they were even in position in the last week of the regular season to contend for a playoff spot. So I think, you know, I mean, team defense, there needs to be better structure. There needs to be a renewed focus on, you know, reducing risky plays. And certainly Steve Yzerman, you know, needs to address or take a look at, you know, it's tough to go out and get a center, but Dylan's absence really exposed just how weak the wings are in the middle, because it was a very bad sign or a very bad look that they struggled so much without him. I mean, one player should not make that much of a difference, but, you know, and I mean, Derek kept going on about matchups on the road, but, you know, they struggled at home as well without Dylan. I mean, that's, you know, end of February, they were in the first wildcard spot. They were within reach of overtaking Toronto for third in the Atlantic. You know, they were ahead of Tampa Bay Lightning, and then came that slide. You know, Dylan got hurt, and then things just went from bad to worse to a complete farce. And, you know, it was like, I mean, that first period against Columbus was probably the nadir of the season, right? I mean, even Malone said they looked like they quit. That's a damning indictment. So, you know, it's just, it was a lot of turbulence in the last 6-7 weeks of the season. You know, a lot to reflect on over the coming weeks and months.
Shawn smiled at this, and I did too. And we're going to have to salute you for being the first guest to use the word nadir on the podcast. So our one listener can go ahead and look that up in the dictionary. I'm sure you'll be proud of Miss St. James for using that. So well, obviously Steven Stamkos is going to be an unrestricted free agent. That's a center you can go get. But is there, you know, one, you know, I know it's just not as simple as one cure all, but what is there? Is there a player position that you think Yzerman can address? I mean, he's done a good job, right? Bringing in DeBrincat and adding Kane. You know, he's not shy about doing that in the offseason, making some moves. Is there someone out there you think that can make that difference? And maybe, you know, I'll let you answer that if you think that's true.
Well, I'm sure they're going to take a look at Stamkos. You know, I mean, you know, on the older side as far as age goes, but an incredible resume. And Steve obviously has a lot of history with him going back to Tampa Bay. So, you know, maybe bring him in and see if he can help kind of strengthen that middle position, because I do think, I mean, we saw a lot from Comfort. I thought Comfort looked significantly. He came up, I mean, those goals Monday night, you know, when the Habs looked like they were going to run away with it, those were huge. I think, you know, Andrew Kopp deserves credit for, you know, coming back within a week of suffering a broken cheekbone, but stats-wise, he hasn't been, performance-wise, as when he's played center, he hasn't been what they hoped when they brought him in. So it's just so hard when you don't get to draft, an elite center like that. It's so hard to get one. And if you do, then it's usually late in his career. But Steve, Steve showed last season he's not just going to go for a youth movement. He's going to bring in veterans. He's going to do what he can in free agency to try and make this team more competitive. He steadfastly and wisely won't put a timeline on the rebuild. And I don't really even know that you can. Buffalo Sabres have had 2 first overall picks since 2018, and they were eliminated before the Wings, even though they should be further ahead in the rebuild. But it's just it's really hard to address all the needs, and when you can't do it from within via the draft.
Well, I wonder too, Helene. Your point about the draft and finding a future star center, obviously it's a good one, and it's true. But I'm sure they'd love one, but it seems to me they need 1B to Larkin's 1A at the very least, right? And I know that he's not a top center in the league, but he's really good still. And just if they can find a way so the drop off isn't quite as much from him to the second line center, and then from the second to the third line center, that would seem to me to make a difference. But I'm curious, do you also think, again, I don't want to, Carlos loves it when I talk about the bounce of the puck, but the puck does bounce around a lot, and there's a lot of there. I've watched a lot of games this season, especially down the stretch, where it's out. It kind of gets off. It bounces off the goalie or the post or whatever, and they don't quite have. Thomas Holmstrom or whatever, somebody that can kind of redirect that. Just sort of a gritty, offensive-minded player who can also check some. Sorry, that's a basketball term. A two-way guy. I think that applies to both sports. But yeah, somebody that's just opportunistic. Could you see that help out a little bit too, since we're staying on offense?
Well, I think they actually have, some clutch scorers, some guys who score. Daniel Sprong, 18 goals, and I think he averages like 12, 13 minutes a game. But Patrick Kane, he's a game changer. I think they had the offense this season. It was more, again, going back to the team defense, to the structure that lacked at times. And then, the depths that they felt they were so much better at. And they certainly, remarkably healthy, especially on defense, and had enough goalies to mask Ville Husso basically being unavailable for 2/3 of the season. So I wouldn't, I don't know that it's a score. Certainly if you see a 20-year-old Brendan Shanahan walking about anywhere, they'd love to add that, but most players are just, again, so hard to come by. So, but I think, if they can re-sign both Patrick Kane and David Perron, I would do that if I were them. I think both have just, proven incredible value. You want your young guys to score, but those 30-somethings really made a huge difference at the end as well.
Are they going to, looking at the players, I know maybe some of the fans aren't happy with the limping toward the finish a little bit with Lalonde. Coach is always an easy target in some sense, but could they do some shakeup? Maybe Bugner on defense, right? Maybe somebody has to be kind of a sacrificial lamb, or they can make a change. Do you think the coaching staff needs any kind of shakeup? You
think they're going to bring in a new defense coach and just immediately go and identify this 1980s supermodel?
That's the first test.
And that's the test. That's the test. Yeah, Bob Bugner. He's not going to lay that one down. I think had they not recovered from that skid and started sinking like they did a few years ago, Derek has another year. I think Steve might have, the disappointment might have been so overwhelming, but I think, Derek, deserves some credit too for how hard he really, I think, he kept this team very even-keeled and really emphasized, don't get down because you played your best game of the season and still lost to the Rangers, because you played so well against the Capitals and still lost. Like that Pittsburgh game, it was just, up and down the ice trading goals. But going into Toronto. And even, Monday night, I mean, that huge comeback victory. And he goes in the room and, he tells them, okay, now this is a business trip to Montreal. Just focus. And I think deserves credit for keeping them so focused and keeping them, not letting the emotions overwhelm them. So, Steve keeps his cards very tight to his chest. But I do think Derek, I think at the end, he showed that he deserves credit for how close they came as well, that they were in it till the very end.
Before we let you go, Helene, and by the way, I want to clear the record. I wanted y'all to be able to go to New York because I know you like to go see the world, Helene. It's not living high on the hog. We stay at Fairfields and Courtyards, especially in that city. And, we're within a budget. We have a per diem. It allows you to eat a hot dog on the street, maybe a slice of Ray's pizza. So it's not about that. Carlos likes to play this up. He's stuck in 1985. In any case, I wanted you to see the world, and Madison Square Garden is awesome. I don't know if Carlos has
I would estimate I've eaten 2,000 bowls or more of oatmeal on the road.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So we want to dispel this.
Right. This is all between us. Our bosses aren't listening, so let's keep it up.
We want to dispel this myth that Carlos likes to perpetuate. He does the same thing with Dave Burkett. That's just our lovable Carlos for you. But in any case, before we let you go, let's get back to something that Carlos also loves, and that's optimism. And I'm curious what you think the ceiling is of Lucas Raymond. Getting back to Steve Yzerman real quickly, he's drafted pretty well, right? I don't know how good Raymond can be. Sider's already one of the best young defensemen in the league. How good can Edmondson be? But can you speak to a couple of these young guys looking into the future?
Raymond, he's 22, and you see, sometimes you have to give young players time just to mature and grow physically. And, he had such a good offseason last year, and you've absolutely seen that down the stretch here. Those kind of clutch goals. He's not going to lose the ability to do that as he ages. He's only going to get better at it. So, ceilings, I think it's tough to predict, but this is just, if there's something that, what the best things to come out of the season, it's just Lucas Raymond's play, Moritz Seider's poise, Simon Edmondson coming in and showing he belongs in the top four. That's tremendous. Those players are only going to get significantly better and stronger. And that's what a rebuild needs, is to have that kind of elite push from within in order to get better.
I think Carlos has a question about 2019 for you, maybe 2020.
Carlos knows this coming Friday. It's Friday, April 19th. And on April 19th, 2019, Good Friday, Steve Yzerman returned to the franchise that he captained. And so this is the perspective I want to draw for people. 2019, they were, I think, fourth from the bottom, bad team. His first full year cut short by the pandemic, but 2020, the Wings were the worst team in the league by 23 points. They were just terrible. So now in only 4 years, they're now competing, they take it to game 82 before their playoff chase ends. That's really remarkable. That's better than a lot of other teams who've been near the bottom of the standings. So from that perspective, I think you just have to appreciate what these last few weeks were like, even though, it would be so much fun to see them in the playoffs and against the Rangers. I don't think they've met them in the playoffs since 1950. It's been a long time between those two original 6 teams, but this has been a remarkable season, and people should be excited about it, and people should be already looking forward to next October.
I think Helene is saying we should bring back Jeff Blashill is really what she's getting at. By the way, was that 19?
No. Listen, I was just in Tampa. Scotty Bowman at 90, still sharper than anybody else. He knows everybody's draft picks through round 7. So bring back Scotty Bowman. He would love this too. He got by with 2 assistants. Now there's one per player. So he would love that.
I would just love it. Who wouldn't? If there's one town I mean, maybe the Tigers and Jim Leland or something, but yeah, Scotty Bowman could walk in right now and they'd be like, yep, let's, get out of here, Derek. You're fine. We got Scotty back. But yeah, it's impressive. Yeah, that's, there has been encouragement, not from every player necessarily. I don't know if the prospects or whatever, like the Sebastian Cosa era is about to begin or anything like that. But Raymond has been impressive. I mean, that's been, and he did what they needed him to do. He needed to bulk up and get tougher and not get pushed off the puck. And he did that. And obviously the scorer's touch was always there, but being able to hold on to the puck has been the difference for him, and you hope that it's going to continue. It hasn't with Seider as much, since the Calder Trophy. I mean, he just hasn't really close, right, to maybe being in that elite kind of Norris Trophy discussion yet. And they're young. There's still time. And I think that's where it's, I'd like to see them add a really, really good, solid, experienced defenseman, defensive defenseman who's maybe going to coach a little bit too, right? Help the guys develop. And we've seen that on offense as well. I mean, one of the things Alon loves to talk about is, Perron and his competitiveness and all that. And I'm sure that filters in through the, Patrick Kane, it filters in through the dressing room into younger players. That's the example. So I think there's, but now the question is, the bar, where is the bar now, right? Now, shouldn't we expect the playoffs next year? Is it good enough to just say, well, we improved another point or two? Because right now, Lalonde talked about, what's the next thing? It's improvement. Well, you were on the doorstep. You just lost out on the tiebreaker for the playoff spot. So you really can't improve much and not get into the playoffs. I mean, isn't that going to be the discussion? Now, I know Yzerman has always tried to stay away from. I never want to do a timeline and I never want to talk about playoffs. But is he not forced to now think about it?
I think absolutely. Their fans will go into next season expecting the Wings to make the playoffs. And Derek has talked a lot down the stretch here about how nobody had them in the playoffs back in September, October, and they overachieved. But I think it's a little bit okay. Well, that was 6 months ago. They changed the narrative with that fabulous January, and with in February looking like all they had to do was go 500, and they would be maybe even in the first wild card. I mean, the narrative is allowed to change during the season. The Wings reset it, and now they reset it again. The bar, they reset the bar again with going all the way to game 82. That going into next season, absolutely, they deserve for there to be outside expectations. There should be internal expectations as well, but that they are going to be a playoff team. Now, you're going to look at the rest of the league and think it was an aberration that the New York Devils, struggled as much as they did. But then nobody expected the Philadelphia Flyers to be in the playoff picture for as long as they were. So there are always surprises, but I think the Wings absolutely, should expect themselves to be ready to be good enough that the playoffs are going to be the end game, that they are in them next season.
Blend that section right there with Helene. We'll let her have the final word on the Wings. We're going to take a break, Carlos. Let's thank Helene for coming in. It's always a pleasure. Hopefully we'll have you back maybe around the draft time, right? Preview the draft or maybe post-draft. Whatever works out for you.
Absolutely. All right. Always happy to.
All right. Good to have you, as always. And Carlos, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. All right, Carlos, let's talk about the Pistons. And I would say a different kind of heartbreak, but that's ridiculous to say. That you can't have heartbreak if you're not at least decent, right? I don't even know what to call this. They've set the record for the worst. All right, let me get this straight. They just lost more games than they've ever lost in the history of the franchise. The last 2 years, I think, are the most losses in a 2-year span in the history of the franchise. They've gotten worse since Troy Weaver took over, the general manager 4 years ago, in each successive year. The asset management has been terrible. They made all these trades at the deadline and have a couple of second-round picks to show for it. The coach, I'm still not convinced Monty Williams wants to be here.
It's been a whole year, yeah.
That's just speculation on my part. I mean, he did say this opening news conference when he was hired, and I applauded him for this at the time, that he was here because of the money. In fact, he said, people always say it's not about the money. Well, yeah, it's about the money. Hey, good for him, right?
Absolutely.
He came in with a good record. No, good for him. So it's just this fan base, and I contend this is still a good basketball town. It's not the same place it was when we were young, Carlos, when you could go to random high schools and watch future NBA lottery picks. So the talent level locally maybe isn't the same, and maybe that's diminished some of the interest at the grassroots level, but it's still a really, really good basketball team. Weirdly enough, Carlos, they were 12th in attendance. How do you explain that? No, yeah, fine. They bring in school kids, whatever. But I was only there maybe once where the crowd was awful. Otherwise, every time I was there, it was half full or better. How do you, I mean, maybe that's a subject we'll address here in a few minutes, but what's your sense? And you've been around this town a long time. Can you remember a fan base feeling as hopeless as this fan base feels about this team at this moment?
Not with the Pistons. I mean, it's even during some of the dark times, they still had Grant Hill. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be, what's weird about it is, Goris seems to be at least spending money. It's not like he's Chris Ilitch and, not opening the checkbook like his dad did. So it is kind of hopeless, because you figure if you're trying to do the right thing and you're spending money and it's still not working, whether it's Van Gundy or whoever, what's the answer? And maybe this is, as we should get into it, maybe is why they're announcing they're going to try to hire somebody else to find those answers, right? Somebody who can guide the franchise in a different way. It'll be, I think, a new position, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't know if it's maybe it's a new title, but it seems to me that by doing this, and a lot of fans are really frustrated, a lot of Pistons fans are really frustrated this week. They want Weaver out. A lot of them want Monty Williams out. And they don't understand why those moves weren't made that Monday morning, whatever, the day after they got back from Sunday night, after they got done playing the Spurs on a regular season game. But I think you just mentioned a couple of names, Van Gundy, and who else did you mention? I don't think you mentioned Dwayne Casey, but Gores, yeah, he hired Stan Van Gundy, who was a coach who got a team to a finals in Orlando and had some success with Miami and was really respected around the league as a basketball guy, and gave him both titles. And then they brought in Jeff, what was his name, Bowers, I can't remember, from Orlando to be his kind of day-to-day general manager. But those moves at the time didn't seem completely unreasonable, right? Bringing in Dwayne Casey, was a coach of the year, was a good developer, young talent in Toronto. And I still think he's a good coach, and I think they would have won more games had he been the head coach this year, to be honest. He's got a better track record with developing young guys. So maybe Gores is going to use a firm and try to say, all right, let's get some basketball names. I mean, obviously he'll go through the interview process, but maybe he's just trying something a little bit different and let them come in and then let them make the basketball decisions, because clearly Gores' decisions have not worked out.
Yeah. I mean, it's you and I were talking about it a little bit earlier about the search firm thing and how it worked for the Lions, but it also didn't work for the Lions when they first tried it. So, there's no cure-all. There's no magic, formula for you get a search firm, you hire the right guy, it's all fixed. It may not work. Like I said, with the Lions, it didn't work the first time under Martha Ford when they hired Ernie Accorsi and they went and got Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. It worked the second time with Sheila Hamp, but with the help of Chris Spielman. And I think that's, to me, you're seeing some of this, the names being floated around like Tayshaun Prince and guys who have sort of an attachment to the Pistons and the glory days and either the coming to work people, whatever. It doesn't, I don't know if there's an answer to this, and Gores hasn't been here that long. So that's another thing. Maybe, if there was some way to reach back, and I know Isaiah Thomas is just never going to be the name that anybody wants to hear around here for various reasons. But there's got to be, and maybe it is Tayshaun, maybe it is someone like that. Maybe, I don't know, but there's something is not working, and And I don't know if it starts with the coaching or if it starts with the general manager. I mean, Troy Weaver, it seems like he's been dead man walking for a while. I don't know how you can bring him back to be making any kind of decisions, have any kind of power.
You can't.
You can't. That's the problem. Even if he doesn't want to walk away from his contract, I mean, how do you keep him just as a lame duck? If you hire the new guy who's over him. I mean, I don't know how that happens, but there's got to be a change. And maybe, Goris doesn't want to be seen as the monarch out in LA making these decisions 2,500 miles away. He wants to hire somebody who sounds or seems like they know what they're doing, respected name. You have the press conference, everybody, glows over this new person, because every new person who's going to be a team president or whatever the job title is going to be then it's always the new thing is the best thing. So this person,
or you get the benefit of the
absolutely
doubt, right?
Because you don't know.
It's not that you don't know. It's not that they're the best thing, but
people love the new.
You'd have to be pretty misanthropic to assume that they will stink when there's no record. Although sometimes people do come in, like Troy Weaver didn't come in with a record, but he came in from an organization that's one of the best front offices in the NBA.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's what they did. That's what the Lions do with Matt Patricia.
That's why the backup quarterback for the Lions has always been the most popular guy, because we don't know what he can do, but he can't be as bad as the guy who's, throwing picks right now. So it's always, you give him the benefit of the doubt. And, that's not incorrect necessarily, but it's PR wise, it's a good move for Goris to do that. Like do something different, do something new, give people some hope. If they fire Weaver, that'll appease the fan base more. And that's
it will.
To your point, Shawn, I mean, that's maybe reason enough alone to make this move and to try something different, even if you don't know that it's the answer. You don't have a strong, and that's my the fans need something to look forward to have hope for, but there's no clear, and I'll go on the record. I've said this, I've written this, I wrote this before, that I didn't think that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell were the obvious choices that were going to lead this team to a lot of success. It didn't seem to make sense at the time. They've proven me wrong. I'm the only one probably who thought that. Everybody else thought they were going to be, great, GM coach. But
most people just thought, hey, let's wait and see what they do. I mean, that's what you do, right? You don't know.
Nobody knows.
The owners don't. The owners
right.
don't know. The owners don't. You got to have luck, right? How often do you and I? Sorry to interrupt. How often do you and I talk about having to have luck in the draft in every sport?
Yeah,
right. You do. Well, owners, and you and I have actually, I think, talked about this before. We've talked about it a lot, just the two of us in our friendship. But and this it's almost the most underrated thing in sports. We talk about luck. You talk about luck on the field of play, the bounce of the ball, whatever sport you want. Does the ball hit the shortstop or go between the short and second, and it's a base hit and you win the game, whatever. But the most, to me, underrated part of necessary luck in professional sports is, does the owner hire the right people? Because you don't know. They don't know.
Yeah. They
made their money. They may know how to run a business, right? They made their money doing something else.
Yeah, the one thing, yes, you're absolutely right. You have to hire the right people, but it is true that often, I think, in sports, when owners have built their own businesses, not been given their business by their daddy or whatever, when they've built their own businesses, those businesses have grown into billion-dollar empires, and they've had to learn how to manage, these massive organizations. And, they're very hands off at that point. They have to hire people who hire the right people and create the right kind of culture within their business and what their ethos is, what their, all that stuff, their mission statements and all that is transferable, because a lot of these owners also, they diversify, they have different businesses. They don't know everything about everything, but you have to have some kind of, guiding light that tells you how you treat people, how you work with people. And we've seen it, as you and I travel around and we go to different teams and, organizations, you just see something different. You see, and I'm just, as an example, I'm going to say, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, that team under the Rooneys does things the right way, even if they're not going to be successful every single year or whatever, but they're generally considered a very stable organization, a very stable franchise. And it goes kind of top to bottom for how they deal with, their stadium operations, the media, players, press conferences, even how I think it filters down to how they fire and hire executives and coaches. It's not a breakneck, let's just reactionary, let's fire everybody, let's hire everybody new, let's, cut your heads off and all this stuff. And, so there are examples of that. It doesn't always work. The Falcons, I think, under Arthur Blank, right? He built, co-founder of Home Depot and, another organization that has been very stable, not the most successful in the world. But I think the Falcons do things the right way most of the time. It doesn't always equate to winning. But I think when you know how to, apply the same principles in a business throughout a sports franchise, and I mean, sports teams are huge businesses now, right? They're all billion-dollar businesses now. So the owners have to be hands off. But as you said, having luck, you do still have to have luck in finding the right executives to lead your franchise, and that's where Goris. And I think with Goris, I don't know. Do you think if he lived here, would it be any different?
Not necessarily. And I'll tell you why. Here's the thing. And by the way, here's another good example. It's a non-sports example, but I'll relate it just to our business in sports. The editor who hired Mitch Albom, his name is Joe Distelheim, who, rest in peace, died a couple of years ago. I worked for him in Alabama. Great, great editor. And I remember when I was down in Alabama, this is in the 90s, and somebody asked him about Mitch. And Mitch was already, I think, Tuesdays with Morrie had just come out. And he said, how did you know? And he said, well, you don't. He said he was 27 or 28. I don't know. He was young. And he had some musical talent. And he liked that he had musical talent. He thought about the rhythm and the ear. And then if you had an ear for music, that might show up in the words. And he said the clips were fine. But there was just something about it. He said he figured he'd take a chance, He said he couldn't fully explain why he did. And it turned out to be not a bad decision, right?
Luck.
But at 20, yeah, exactly. That's the point. At 27, 28, does an editor know that Mitch is going to become a national bestseller and one of the best? You don't completely. He said he had a good feeling, and he was curious about the music, and he was thinking, so there's some logic there too, and how you think things through. But at some point, you're just taking a chance.
Oh, absolutely.
You're just taking a chance. So here's my thing about Goris. Get back to this real quickly. You could make an argument right now that Jalen Duren, the center, and Jaden Ivey, the shooting guard, aren't going to turn out. You could make that argument. You could also make an argument they can. They've both shown flashes. But do they belong with Cade Cunningham? Does Jaden Ivey in particular belong with Cade Cunningham? Is Jalen Duren ever going to become a better rim protector? Because they desperately need defensive presence at the rim. And there's center played for Connecticut. Klingon is his name. It'd be a lottery pick. Does Tom Gores have the smarts? Not the smarts, that's the wrong way to put it. The knowledge. Would you want him to make that decision? Hey, we're going to give up on Duren and we're going to go get Klingon from Connecticut with our first round pick because I think it's a better fit with Cade. And he's thinking, no, Gores doesn't have that. Now you could argue a GM may not fully have it either, but he has a much better idea of it. Right. So Gores has got to make the decision to bring the person in to make some really difficult decisions with this team. I think Cunningham showed stuff this year that makes him, I still don't know if he's a superstar or a star. He's going to be a star. I think that's pretty clear. But is he going to be a superstar? I don't know. Maybe not. The odds are probably not. But you can't say that for sure. But do you give up on Duren and Ivy already? Stuart Thompson, to me, if you're just asking me, I'd build around Cunningham and Thompson. But then that means you got to have shooting, and I don't want to get in the weeds with all that. But the point is, these are things that Gores, these can't be his decisions.
Well, here's a question about Gores is that, the Pistons are also not his main business. It's his equity firm. So how much does that hurt you when you're an owner and you live 2,500 miles away, whatever, and it's your stepchild, almost a pet project, really something he's always aspired to have, being from Flint and all that. And, it can't help, right? It can't be the greatest thing in the world to have this as your number two focus.
Well, but here's a good example of that. But to your point about being here. So let me ask you, Mark Cuban made his money as a financial guy too, right? Plus he's become a celebrity and television and all that. So the Dallas Mavericks are clearly not his first. They may be his first love, but they're not his top priority in terms of his business. But he's at Mavericks games all the time. So does that make a difference? Is it being there that makes a difference or not? I don't know that it has to be your number one focus, as Cuban and a lot of other owners show. But, Steve Ballmer made his money with Microsoft or whatever, the LA Clippers owner. He's at games all the time.
Yeah, that's the thing does it, at least if you live in the city, does it help you be connected to the day-to-day struggles of a team, hearing the fan? Because, from LA, you can turn off the noise pretty easily if you'd like, and who likes criticism? But if you're in town, I guarantee you that, Sheila Hamp hears criticism more and Chris Ilitch hears criticism more. You can't escape it from your daily life.
Oh, yeah.
Here. But if you're in LA, maybe you're not as attuned to it and you maybe have some selective hearing about what it is, what the problems are. I'm not saying he does. Who knows? He may be on the internet. He may be listening to this podcast right now. Hi, Tom, by the way.
He's yeah, right. That's funny. He's got to have, I'd be shocked if he doesn't have an idea of how unhappy and disillusioned the fan base.
Not an idea, but a deep sense of it.
I bet he's got it in me. Grew up here.
Do you think he has as much of a sense as Ilitch does and Hamp?
In terms of the disillusionment with the fan base, yes. In terms of the feel for the team, does he love basketball? I don't know. Or does he just love the idea of basketball?
I think, who knows? I would imagine you love it.
I don't
loving
know.
it and being aware of the problems and the successes and the failures and why,
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. If you love it, then you're there, right? And you're there up close.
You would think.
Yeah, I don't know if that makes a difference or not. He leaves himself open for criticism in that way. Absolutely. If they were winning, nobody'd care.
Here's the question: is would you, if you're a fan, the Tigers fans are angry at Ilitch because he doesn't spend. He lives here and he's is around, but he doesn't spend. Or Gorse is the other way around. He doesn't live here, but he spends, and so they both have struggles in their own different way. Yeah, it's going to be. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens when, when we talked about when they drafted Jaden Ivey, right? Is that he needs the ball in his hands, but so does Cade, and there's only one ball, and it's turned out to be true of that's been one of the struggles between them, and how is it going to fit? And now.
Yeah, the shooting too.
Yeah, and you mentioned with Cade does Cade even want to be here in your column that you wrote? That's a whole nother question. Is this team seems to be on the verge of breaking apart in significant ways, potentially very quickly.
It's true. On the other hand, as bad as they are, they do have. This is going to sound crazy, but with Cunningham, if Thompson's healthy, Thompson, I think the fan base, I know some of them love him. He's got something to him that it could be really, really special. Not scoring a ball necessarily, but winning basketball. And Fontecchio, the Italian that they brought in at the trade deadline. I like the way
you were going to say Fontecchio the German, were you?
Yeah. Well, you never know, but no. If they get a few vets, they use their cap wisely, and a couple of guys take a step, and they get some health luck.
That's a lot.
They should be at least. It is a lot, but it can change. We were talking about Helene earlier in this show about how hard it is to rebuild in hockey and so forth, and how long you can take. In the NBA, it's not like the NFL where you change overnight almost, but you can. There's something out there. It just doesn't look like it. But they got to have the right person making the right decisions, and it's hard to know what those are. They've got a lot of tough decisions, man.
Well,
they really.
The question to me, my last question for you is just: you bring in a new person. Well, that new person is going to come in and do nothing. They're going to shake things up because that's what new people do, right? Everything that came before me was garbage. I'm the leader. I know the answer. We're going to do things completely, whatever. So now you're talking the chances of making all these shakeups, getting rid of players, bringing in new guys, changing the front office structure, all that stuff. not going to happen in one season. So you're looking at, 2-3 seasons away from them being decently competitive, where you're even dreaming about a playoff spot.
If it all goes right.
Maybe 5 years.
No, it's true. Now, look, the Sacramento Kings played the playoffs last year for the first time in 20 years. So it can happen.
That's true. You're right. It's a good model to follow.
Yeah, and now they got a fun young team. I don't know that it's a title team, but that's beside the point. But yeah, no, you can get stuck. You can get stuck. It's just it's easy to do. So, whoever they bring in is going to have a big decision with Monty Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, and the first thing they got to figure out is, does he want to be here? Does he actually really want
$78 million? Probably a good reason why he wants to be here. But yeah,
or does he take a
buyout?
Take a generous buyout. Yeah, does he want to be here? Can he loosen up a little bit with the players in terms of how he's teaching and what they're doing and playing to their strengths and all that kind of stuff? I'm sure he's frustrated too with the roster. Troy Weaver built a team that was great for 1990, in a lot of ways. But in any case, all right, let's take one more. We're not going to solve this, man. It's going to take years for them to solve it. We're not going to solve it in the second part of a podcast. Although I am right now, I'm working on a column about it today, and that's not going to solve anything either. But the bottom line is, I think we both agree, Troy Weaver can't make decisions.
Yes.
Right. That's the thrust of the column. I've written it 3-4 times. It needs to be written again in the context of somebody coming in. But it is time. So, all right, it's time for us to take a quick break and return with a little bit more Free Press Sports with Carlson Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlson Shawn. All right, that time of the show, my favorite thing. It's actually your favorite thing. Lay it on me.
Simple. It is your BFF, Mike Elrick, is the new captain of our Free Press softball team that plays on Belle Isle, and we're starting our spring season. And Mr. Elrick, I'm sorry, he wants to be called Mr. Elrick, required us to have a practice at one of the Detroit fields near us. Actually, we live really close to each other, and we had a few players show up, Shawn, and it was last weekend. It was a nice sunny day. And, every time I kind of end the season thinking, man, that was hard. It was hard to get people together, blah, blah, blah. But every time we start a new season and just playing catch, the most American thing you can do, right? The pop of the glove and all that, and hitting having a little infield and outfield practice and batting practice. And I just grew up playing baseball. I love it. I miss playing it, and softball is about the closest thing I can do these days. And it's just good to see people, old friends, new teammates. And it was just a joy to be out there. And maybe one of these days you come out, and I know you came out last year, you come out again, and sure, son.
I did. I would love to. That's a lovely image. It's no wonder that you like the original Top Gun, though, because baseball is not America's sport and hadn't been for a long time. And I don't even know how many kids even play catch anymore. But that's a different podcast. But that is nice. I am going to stay in that same realm. My favorite thing was, and I'm just having some silly fun here, that same Mr. Elrick, when I was recording a podcast, talked to me a little bit softball and said that you had to have your captaincy stripped because you didn't show enough in your first try, and because Tarek Skubal blew his Cy Young chances after one outing. This is his words. These are his words. He said, since he made that judgment on Tarek Skubal, I was forced to make the judgment on him. He actually did.
It was a battlefield emotion,
which I thought was pretty stinking funny. And
Mike is one of my all-time favorite people.
He'll make you awesome. Oh, that was me. He said no, he didn't show enough. He had plenty of time, more than enough time. It's not his captaincy had to be stripped.
I got 2 seasons and I was let go.
Yeah. So and he was joking about the Skubal thing, but anyway, no, he thought that whole thing was fun. By the way, he's like, he wants us to do more of that. I said, well, as long as Carlos, when we plan it out, then it is fun. So yeah. He said he would love that. So did Mark Fellhauer, our producer over there at Solar Detroit Podcast, which you can check out on Tuesdays. Yes, I can plug that here. All right, Carlos, let's get out of here.
Let's do it.
My favorite thing is hanging out with you every week. Seriously.
I love to say the same thing too, but I still love softball more. Sorry. All right.
Oh, thank you. I look forward to it.
Oh, I do too. Mostly the reason I look forward to it is to thank our producer, Robin Chan, and our executive producers, Kirkland Crawford and Anjanette Delgado, but mostly our sign the check boss person, Nicole Avery Nichols. Actually, that's not true. Mostly it is who, Shawn?
Oh, well, the listeners. So the listener.
Tom Goris and his listeners.
Yes. Yeah, he's found a way to get into our phones. He's listening. He's got people doing that. Or who knows? Maybe Robin's in cahoots with it. I don't know. We'll see. But no, thank you all. You can obviously find us where you find your favorite podcast. The key is to subscribe, rate us when you get there. Let us know when you think. And keep coming back. We love it. We're grateful. And until next week, Carlos, I'll see you next? Who knows when? The draft's next week. So we'll be talking a couple of times with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.